Mike Gerwellman from the Executive Director of the Montgomery County Land Bank.
Thank you, Marcia. I've worked almost my entire career in some form of government or quasi-public agency, and so therefore I can't speak without a PowerPoint presentation, so I apologize for the getting us up and running here today. I am the Executive Director of the Land Bank. The Land Bank's been around since roughly 2012. It hasn't been staffed, or wasn't staffed until late in 2013. The organization is effectively an agent of the county. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the structure of the organization itself, what it does, and also about a couple of programs that I think you have particular interest in. So I call it Land Banking 101. We'll talk a little bit about what is the land bank, what's it do, how does it operate, and so forth. Then we'll get into two specific programs that we launched this year. Again, I mentioned the land bank is really an organization in its infancy. And just this year we began to launch some programs. It wasn't until January of this year that we actually had a second employee. We're now up to 4, and that's probably where we're going to operate for a while for the basis of the year. And we're going to launch 6 different programs during the course of the year. 2 of them I think will be of particular interest to you. And Marcia mentioned last time when I was here in January, a lot of the questions had to do with these particular programs because they're investor opportunities. And people were interested in the details of those, some of which actually hadn't been vetted entirely yet. So in addition to that, I'll give you a little look ahead in terms of where the land bank might be going in 2016, very briefly as well. So, first question is, what is this thing called a land bank? So I'd like to start by perhaps telling you what it's not. It's not anything like the Federal Reserve. We're not a federal organization. We're created on a local basis, basically an agent for the county. We're not like Chase or Bank of America. We're not this big, tall skyscraper type of operation. Our idea of mobile banking is more like this. Our Director of Technology there, he's a little long in the tooth, but the type of technology that we have available in our mobile banking app here, you can see is not quite up to snuff to what everybody else is doing in Google and in the Google space. We're also not a depository for property. A lot of people say land bank, well, geez, I can put a deposit in here and get a withdrawal out. Land bank has all kinds of property, we can exchange these. No, not really. That's not what we do. Although land banks have the capacity to do that, we do not, at least not in a major way. Our friends in Cuyahoga County, up in the Cleveland area, I believe also in the Akron area, they actually do have inventory of properties, and they put them out on the website. If you go to the Detroit Land Bank's website, you'll see a whole slew of properties that you can acquire from them. We don't do that. And the reason we don't do that is because of the carrying cost. Here's some discussion. I saw numbers on boards here earlier after cash flow discussions. It's all about money. In our land bank, we're not wealthy. We're not flush with cash. And so we're absolutely not flush with cash, I would tell you. But we do have some operating funds to do some things. We have some unique tools that are available to us based upon the authorities provided to us under state law that are unique, which I'll touch on. Effectively, these issues or these authorities allow us to reposition properties that are distressed. So think of properties that are upside down for one reason or another, particularly if they're tax delinquent, have mortgages on them, other varieties of liens on them. We can get involved in properties such as those and help basically clean up titles. So I wish I were sitting in the middle of that, but we're not. We do have an operating budget of about $1.2 million a year that we utilize and are trying to leverage those funds to the greatest extent possible. One of the reasons for my interest in your group, when Shannon initially called me and talked to Marcia about your group and Tom and others, was investors. Many of the properties that we're dealing with, as I said, they're distressed, I'll call them. They require improvements in order to be habitable again, but they have some good bones, you might say. There's still some equity still in the properties that really could be harvested and placed back in the community's hand for reuse. So that's the underlying philosophy of what it is we're trying to achieve. And our mission effectively is this here. We're trying to deal with these blighted or troubled properties, as I would call them, and get them back into the marketplace. And we can't do that with all properties in the community. But again, we're trying to deal with those that are not the money pits, that there's still really equity in that property on the landscape. But for the real estate taxes, but for the mortgage that sits on it, if you could get clean title to it, the structure itself in the marketplace is still habitable, could be refurbished and reutilized. Okay? Just allow that to diminish and depreciate on the landscape, deteriorate, would be a shame. So what our group does in one of our programs is we do a triage on properties, looking for those that we think can be, shall we say, saved or preserved or reused, if we become involved with them. And I'll give you more detail on that momentarily. So yeah, upside down, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm always surprised by what happens with these things. Put a fly in there and it doesn't happen. But at any rate, I think we all recognize that property. The organization, I report to a board of directors. It's comprised by state law of 5 elected officials and 2 folks from the private sector. Sheila Crane, who's here this evening, is a board of director member. She represents the real estate industry and on the residential side principally. The gentleman there on the private side is Doug Harnish. Doug runs a consulting firm, is very well versed in commercial real estate, worked in the financial industry for a number of years as well. He does forecasting and so forth. And the rest of the folks that you see from the far left on the bottom there, the mayor of Dayton, of course, Nan Whaley, Scott Paulson from Washington Township, trustee. We have both commissioners. We have two commissioners, Debbie Lieberman and Jude Dodge. And then at the top, right-hand corner is Carolyn Rice, she's the county treasurer. And the treasurer's office plays a key role in what it is that we do in order to foreclose upon properties, because she is the keeper or the receiver of the funds, the tax funds. She is also, I will tell you, was the driver for the creation of the land bank here in Montgomery County. It is an issue. The vacant abandoned properties, blighting influences in the community has been a passion for hers, and she's been involved in this particular effort for, I believe, 9 years already. So our metrics in terms of an organization, what we're looking for in terms of outcomes based on that mission are basically to have impact on property values, to increase those, to look for investments, have those investments be made in these properties, ultimately to improve the community in total, and then generate taxes again. Because a lot of these vacant, abandoned properties, they're not doing anybody any good. Nobody's paying taxes on it, nobody's generating a revenue out of it, nobody's taking care of it. They're just bringing the whole community down. And partly the reason for that, which I'm sure is not a surprise to those of you who are Dayton natives, within the urban core itself, just taking Dayton by itself, it's lost 40% of its population base over the last 50 years. So what does that mean in terms of housing? It means we don't need as many, obviously, and that's quite apparent. Countywide, our population since 1960 has just been about flat. It raised a little bit in the 70s and 80s and then kind of tapered back down again. But we continue to build more and more houses in residential units. Some of that has to be done in order to replace elderly stock or stock that is no longer viable any longer. But nonetheless, we still got a lot of inventory on the landscape that needs to be demolished. So our objectives, basically, again, are to stabilize market values, to generate some confidence in the marketplace itself to invest. Driving into neighborhoods in Dayton itself today, it hurts actually when I drive by some of these beautiful homes, but they're vacant. And because they're vacant, they're deteriorating. Nobody's taking care of them. The grass is growing up around. And then the neighbors next door, what are they going to do? I talked to a gentleman actually in Warren County. He had a house on either side of him. And the story that he said to me And what he told me basically is, look, Mike said, I used to take great pride in my home. He said, but I've got this on either side of me. And this was, they were just little ranch Huber type homes on either side of them, as his was, but he took pride in it nonetheless. But why put any more money in a house when I've got a vacant abandoned one on either side of me and nothing is happening with those, right? So that happens there, and then it perpetuates itself through the neighborhood, and the next thing you know, people are moving out, property values are just going down very quickly. So the programs that we've developed are intended to try and stop some of that from happening, trying to do some of this work strategically, because we don't have that much money. We don't have enough money to go in and tear down, say, 40% of the houses in the city of Dayton, although Dayton has a very aggressive program and has been demolishing homes for a number of years. Nonetheless, there's still a lot of excess inventory out there. So removing the excess inventory, we try to align our plans with the communities. So effectively, from a positioning standpoint, our organization tries to take the cue from the local community as to what they want to see occur and where they want these programs to be implemented. They are what I would call boots on the ground. You all are just even a further level down on that, because you're actually out there doing the work, right? You're renovating the homes and so forth. You're making the investments in these neighborhoods. So we generally try and make sure that we're aligned with whatever the community is interested in doing and what they're interested in doing it. In certain areas, we won't do it without their support. But effectively, we're trying to enable investment back into these neighborhoods and restore market confidence. Because again, if I take the scenario with that gentleman with a bad house on either side of him, and the land bank or the community comes in and they demolish those two, what happens? What happens to consumer confidence? Next time somebody comes by to look at the neighborhood, to perhaps purchase a house in that neighborhood, they don't see those wrecks anymore, right? So what happens? Confidence goes up, okay? This is the issue. This is a huge issue. Oftentimes, there's not an easy answer to this because of the magnitude of the problem. For those in my age group, you bought a house and it appreciated, right? I mean, that's the way I always thought about it. And property value is going to go up, and that's going to be my nest egg when I retire. And of course, we all got slapped in the face in 2008 because it doesn't always happen. So what type of real estate does a land bank deal with? Well, we'll deal with any type of real estate. Any office, commercial, residential, industrial, any office, any segment of the marketplace, we will operate in that. So we're not exclusive. Some land banks, to contrast ourselves with Cuyahoga again, they're all about residential. They're focused very much there. Some of the other land banks do a little bit on the commercial side or industrial side. There are brownfield sites in our community that need help. There are a lot of companies in our industrial sites that went bankrupt. Those properties are sitting there vacant. They're not going anywhere. Whoever's got a mortgage on them, who owns the collateral, what's happening with all that? Just sitting there, and it's deteriorating. It's not doing our community any good at all. So we're going to try and be more proactive in attacking these issues as the organization evolves and becomes more mature in a variety of different ways. Some of the authorities that we have available to us under the Ohio Revised Code, if any of you are attorneys, you like these citations, 5722 of the Ohio Revised Code. Basically what the law allows for us to do is initiate tax foreclosure proceedings on property. It can be any property. We can eliminate the back taxes by taking it through that process. So sort of this magic wand, boom, taxes are gone, liens are gone. We take it through a foreclosure process and the property comes to the land bank. We're going to expunge all of that off of the property. Basically reposition it is the way I would refer to it. So those institutions that might have a lien on a property that, because of their own bureaucracy, can't decide what they're going to do with it, so it's been sitting there for a number of years. And just, again, continuing to deteriorate with an effort, if we attack that property, go after it, we'll clean off all of that stuff and basically reposition it. And some people will use this analogous from a public sector side as writing off bad debt. Some people have asked, well, geez, those are taxes that accrued and they need to be paid to the school district and the health district and all the other organizations that are waiting in line for that. Well, it's uncollectible, folks. It's totally uncollectible. We're never going to get that. So we may as well just write it off and move on. So that's what this is all about. The government is saying, We're done with this. It's not in the best interest of this community to continue to wait for that organization, that individual to pay their tax because they're not going to do it. So we'll take it from them, reposition the property, get it into somebody's hands who's going to do something with it. That's what this is about. We are also exempt from real estate taxes. So anytime we acquire a property, we actually don't pay real estate taxes on it. That does give us the ability to hold property for a period of time and assemble property for particular projects, which is a banking, what we call a banking function. So in terms of our role then, just very quickly to summarize, property acquisition in all markets, we acquire them principally through foreclosure processes, but every day, nearly every day, but certainly every week, we get phone calls from people who want to give us property. They just want to get out from underneath it. And the stories I could tell you, it's just unbelievable stories. Anywhere from a gentleman who was a small-time investor who invested his pension into homes, and then the market went south on him, to a lady who got involved in a scam, to some gentleman who's in Japan, and I don't know why he invested on Valley Street, but he did. You know, I can't envision myself investing in something over in Japan on any street, leave alone Valley Street. They owned it there. So you got out of town, out of state, out of country investors that really don't have any idea what they own here as well. And that is definitely a problem for our community. When the real estate market was hot, you know, and the bundles of property were being sold, unsuspecting investors, they ended up owning stuff they don't even know where it's at. So that's part of the quagmire that we have here. So effectively then we'll clear the real estate tax burden. There are certain exceptions to the things that we can do in there. For example, the feds have a priority over us locally. So if there's a federal tax lien on the property, it becomes an issue for us. But that's a little bit in the weeds, I think, for the discussion we want to have here today. I mentioned earlier that we have 6 programs that we've launched this year, or are in the process of launching, I should put it that way. Some of them are specific to our client communities. We view our work as being work for the communities. Okay? We want to do things that help support the direction that they want to go. We're not telling them where and how they should be doing their business. They have plans, they have professionals in their organizations, they have objectives themselves in terms of what they're trying to achieve in their community and areas. So we want to support those things. We have a rehab loan program that for them. We have a planning grant, some soft money that they could go out and develop strategic plans in certain geographic areas if they wanted to. In Farmersville, it could be the whole town, or whole village. In the city of Dayton, to contrast that, it might be a city block for a plan. It's a $50,000 grant. They match at 25%. And then land banking, which is actually a process where we would actually hold properties on their behalf if they're trying to accumulate properties for a particular larger project that might be longer term. Now, in terms of the public programs that we have, which is really addressed to you all and to investors, we have 3 that fall into that space. The first, and these are really rotten names for these programs, I gotta tell you, and we need something, a little sizzle. These are really boring. Tax foreclosure sponsorship. How many of you are familiar with the city's side lot program? A couple of you, okay. All right, so I'm not going to get into excruciating detail, but I'll tell you a little bit about ours. Deed and escrow, which is basically a renovation program. And then thirdly, and that's also, those top 2 are residential, okay? So those 2 are about housing. 1 to 4 family types of deals, and then there's commercial redevelopment. And for us, anything over 4 family is considered commercial. So you put everything else in the bucket of commercial redevelopment. That program is currently being developed. We got a long way to go with that one to develop something that's scalable. And we can repeat over and over again because commercial properties are so different. So the 2 that I'm going to focus on are the tax foreclosure sponsorship and deed and escrow, because both of those are up and operating right now. We did what I call a soft opening on these 2 programs in April. So they are up and going. The reason we did it in what I call soft, and we didn't make a big splash or anything about it, we want to make sure we got our ducks in order before we went out there and made it more public and embarrassed ourselves because we weren't ready for it. I think these two programs are ready to go. The program manager for the first program actually starts on Monday. So she'll be ready to go, hopefully. We'll get her up to speed real quick. And the program manager for Dayton Escrows has been on board since January. So what we're trying to do in terms of objectives with these particular programs is pretty fundamental. Reposition these distressed properties, okay, to permit their reuse. Okay, so we've got liens on them, we've got mortgages on them, we've got back taxes on them. Let's get them through a process and clean that all up. Let's expunge it, let's get it off the record and get it in somebody's hands, right? And salvage the equity. Okay, so these properties that we're talking about, if you all came to me and said, Mike, I'd like property at 1390 XYZ Street, you wouldn't say you wanted it unless you knew you could rehab it and make some money out of the deal, right? All right, so that's the property we're looking for. We're not looking for the money pits. We're looking for those that, with an investment, are going to be below market, right? But there's some equity still sitting on the street there, right? It's sitting vacant, so there's some equity there. Maybe $5,000, maybe $10,000, maybe $20,000 worth of equity. We're going to take that back from the owner, whether it's a financial institution or an individual that's just left town for whatever reason. And then we're going to make that available to you under these programs. So the first program we call Tax Enclosure Sponsorship. Effectively, you ask for something, okay? You have identified a property on XYZ Street that you think is vacant, abandoned, tax delinquent, and you'd like to rehab it. You think it's a good investment, okay? So you fill out an application with us, pay your fee. We'll take a look at the property. We'll do some initial due diligence on it on your behalf. There's participant eligibility requirements, okay? Meaning that your firm, there are certain requirements that have to be met for you to be able to play in this arena, in this particular program. I would tell you that those requirements are much more to do about what we would call a responsible owner. In other words, are you up to date on all your taxes, your real estate taxes here in the community? You know, have you been bankrupt perhaps in the last couple of years? Things like that. We can't afford for a government program go in, clean the taxes of a property and hand it over to somebody who might be irresponsible, or then not pay the taxes, right? Looks real good for the government to be doing that kind of thing. So, participant eligibility, property eligibility, we'll look at it real quick, make sure it qualifies. Then we'll initiate the foreclosure on the property. It's about a 6 to 9 month legal process that we go through from that point. Okay? Once it gets into the queue, once it gets into the system, it takes about 6 to 9 months. Sometimes people will say, well, why so long? You know, well, the reason is that the law has been designed to protect the property owner. So we have to do title search, we have to do notification, we have to send notices, we have to publish notices, all the things that you might expect, if you were the owner, that you would expect them to do to protect your interest. That's the way the thing is structured. So it does take about 6 to 9 months. The program, the target market is 1 to 4 family residential. The eligible applicants, an investor, all of you, or an owner-occupant could apply for this. Just about anybody could apply for this. As long as you meet the eligibility requirements, which kind of look like this top group up here. They're going to have violations in town, tax delinquent, foreclosed upon, filed bankruptcy, state residency. The state residency thing is because I don't have to deal with the gentleman in Japan anymore, you know. Those calls get very expensive. And then eligible properties, vacant, tax delinquent. Probate actually shouldn't be on there. If we find the property's in probate or has a federal tax lien on it, it could get kicked out of the system. So, in the process, there is a potential for the case to be dismissed. Okay, so once we get it into the system, into the legal system, and it's being processed, the owner has the ability to come and make restitution on delinquent taxes. So not only do they have to pay back all the delinquent taxes, they have to pay all the court costs that have been accrued as a part of our initiating this process. To date, I will tell you, I've had a few people show up at these hearings, and generally it's to make sure that we take the property. So, you know, it's a please, make sure you take it, because they don't want to deal with it anymore. Federal tax lien, again, is the reason that process would stop or probate. In terms of the fee for this kind of a program, it really has to do more about who's applying and what you're going to use it for. So if you happen to be living next to a vacant lot, and that vacant lot next to you is tax delinquent, perhaps the house was torn down or burnt down, or for whatever reasons, and somebody have walked away from it, the fee is the minimum, which is $2,000. If you're an investor, you're going to pay the premium, which is $4,000. Okay, and there's a gray space in between all of that. And that lot could have a building on it, could have a structure on it, or it could be a vacant lot. So that particular program, what I want you to leave here with is, it's up to you. You see something you like, you think it qualifies, you've done some diligence yourself, you'd like to approach us in acquiring that property, feel free to submit the application. The application is available online for both of these programs. Right now we don't have our own website, so the location for the information is on the county treasurer's website. On the left-hand margin, there's a mess of tabs, so Montgomery County Treasurer, on the left tab, there's a mess of tabs there. The bottom one says Land Bank. Click it, and then you'll see our programs there. There's no subdirectories on our website. It's just all a list of information. So, the second program is we call Deed and Escrow. And the target market, again, is primarily single-family units. And again, our terminology for investors, you all are an investor, but an owner-occupant is going to be an investor as well. So again, we don't determine who's going to be going after these properties. The participation criteria is very similar to what you just saw in the other program. Again, we're looking at issues to make sure that the individuals or the firms that are applying for these are responsible parties. So we're again not turning properties over to individuals who are then not going to pay their taxes and not be responsible in terms of maintenance of these properties. The process in this particular case is quite different, actually, than the tax foreclosure sponsorship. This particular process, we actually already own the property, we the land bank. Okay. We have a small inventory of these properties. What we've done is we've gone out and effectively done what I call triage. We've looked at properties, determined that we think they're viable for reuse. So effectively what you would do on your pro forma, in terms of the acquisition costs, the restoration costs, the rent you're going to get, or the sales price you're trying to hit, doing that pro forma, we do it by eyeball. Okay. We actually also then do an inspection of the property, and we actually create an inspection report. That report effectively tells you what we saw, using a professional that goes into the space. We saw X, Y, and Z kind of things. We think the furnace needs to be replaced, you know, perhaps the plumbing has been removed, you know, it could be other things, but whatever we see. We also give you an opportunity to go into these homes. Okay, now I'm going to contrast this to the first program. The first program, you're coming to us and saying, I'd like to get that property, but that property is owned by somebody else. If you go onto that property, you're trespassing. Some people do go into them anyway, but nonetheless, presumably you're trespassing, right? So you're kind of taking a chance on what you might be buying there. Here, we're trying to give you as much information as we possibly can. We want you to be informed. We don't want you to be surprised, not that you might not be when you get in there and do renovation. I certainly am at home all the time when I do it. But nonetheless, we'll have an open house. You can go through the unit. You can do your pro forma. You can cost out the things that you need to do to the home to bring it up to a certain level that you feel is appropriate to the neighborhood. And then you submit a bid for the purchase price. We have a deadline for that submission. Generally, people will submit them by email. And we always tell folks, if you do it by email, make sure you get a confirmation back from us. You know, click that little box on the